Good evening, and welcome back to my channel, the Nexus Report. Donald Trump just said 3 words that should have every foreign policy analyst on the planet paying attention. We'll find out. Recently, a reporter asked him about Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, warning that an American attack would spark a regional war. Trump didn't hesitate. Of course he would say that. Then he pointed to the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, sitting in the Arabian Sea, called it the biggest, most powerful naval force in the world, and added, "Hopefully, we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right." 3 words. We'll find out. That's not a denial. That's not diplomacy. That's the President of the United States telling Iran's supreme leader, "Prove it." And here's what makes this moment so volatile. On the same day Trump said this, Iran's top security official Ali Larijani announced on X that the formation of a framework for negotiations is progressing. Trump confirmed it. He told reporters aboard Air Force One that Iran was seriously talking to us. So Iran says talks are advancing. Trump says we'll find out if war happens. Both of those things can't be true at the same time, unless both sides are preparing for 2 completely different outcomes simultaneously. Let me walk you through how we got here, what's actually happening behind the scenes, and why the next few weeks could determine whether this ends in a deal or a catastrophe. To understand why Trump is threatening Iran right now, you need to understand what happened inside Iran, starting December the 28th, 2025. It began with economic protests. Iran's rial currency had been collapsing. Electricity and gas were being cut off. Millions of ordinary Iranians took to the streets, initially demanding economic reforms. But the protests quickly became something bigger, a direct challenge to the Islamic Republic itself. Demonstrators chanted, "Death to the dictator." They called for the end of the regime. For the first week, Iran's security forces used mostly non-lethal measures. But on January 8th, everything changed. Protests peaked after opposition figures, including Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's former Shah, urged the public to flood the streets. Millions responded, and the regime responded with overwhelming lethal force. Iran shut down the internet completely. They cut phone communications. They created a total information blackout. And then, according to multiple independent sources and leaked government documents, Iranian security forces opened fire on protesters across the country with live ammunition. Eyewitnesses described rooftop snipers and trucks mounted with heavy machine guns firing into crowds. The scale of killing was staggering. The death toll from January 8th and 9th alone has been the subject of intense reporting, with figures varying widely. Iran's own government publicly acknowledged 3,117 deaths, but internal government estimates tell a very different story. Time magazine reported that 2 senior health ministry officials described a figure approaching 30,000 killed in those 2 days alone. Iran International, citing classified IRGC intelligence reports submitted to the Supreme National Security Council, reported the figure at over 36,500. The Guardian reported that a network of more than 80 medical professionals across 12 provinces estimated the toll could exceed 30,000. These higher numbers haven't been independently verified, and it's important to acknowledge that. The near-total internet shutdown that's been in place for weeks has made verification extremely difficult. The US-based human rights activist news agency, Harana, has confirmed nearly 7,000 deaths with over 11,000 additional cases under investigation. But multiple credible sources using different methodologies, hospital data, Leaked internal government reports, medical networks, have converged on catastrophic numbers. Bodies overwhelmed morgues. Body bag supplies were exhausted. 18-wheel trailers replaced ambulances. Witnesses described bodies stacked in emergency rooms. Families were forced to pay ransoms of $5,000 to $7,000 to retrieve their dead relatives. Amnesty International documented security forces firing from rooftops and footbridges. Multiple medical sources reported that wounded protesters were executed in hospitals. This wasn't crowd control. This was systematic mass killing. Trump saw this unfolding. He had publicly promised Iranian protesters that help was on the way. He drew 2 red lines: stop the nuclear program and stop the killing. Iran crossed both of them. And now Trump is sitting in the Oval Office with the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group in position, talking about finding out whether Khamenei's threats are real. Let's talk about what's actually positioned off Iran's coast right now. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group arrived in the Arabian Sea on January 27th. It's operating with approximately 10 U.S. warships, including 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. Each destroyer carries Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range of over 1,500 miles. The carrier itself deploys roughly 75 aircraft, including F-35C stealth fighters and EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft capable of suppressing enemy radar networks. This isn't a symbolic deployment. This is a strike package. Trump told reporters these ships are a couple of days away from Iran. He's been explicit about the threat. Earlier in the week, he said the vessels were ready to use violence, if necessary. And this isn't the first time Trump has followed through. On June 22, 2025, the United States launched Operation Midnight Hammer. 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flew 18 hours from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, refueling 3 times mid-air, and dropped 14 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bombs, each weighing 30,000 pounds, on Iran's Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan nuclear facilities. A U.S. submarine launched more than 24 Tomahawk missiles at Isfahan simultaneously. The operation involved over 125 aircraft. Not a single shot was fired at the American strike package. Iran's fighters didn't fly. Their air defenses didn't detect the bombers. It was the first operational use of the massive ordnance penetrator in history. Iran's supreme leader called it an act of war. But Iran's actual response was limited. They launched missiles at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the U.S. Central Command headquarters, but no American casualties were reported. That restraint happened before the massacre, before 30,000 dead, before Trump's ultimatum. Now the calculus has changed completely. Here's where the situation becomes a trap that neither side can escape. Iran says it's ready to negotiate, and it appears genuine. Larijani has been shuttling between Oman, Qatar, and regional capitals meeting with intermediaries. The first round of indirect talks was held on February 6th in Muscat, with Oman's foreign minister relaying messages between American and Iranian delegations sitting in separate rooms. But look at what each side is actually demanding. Trump wants Iran to completely dismantle its nuclear program, zero enrichment, full IAEA inspections, destruction of centrifuges, and limits on ballistic missile development. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi held a press conference in Istanbul and was unambiguous. Iran's missile program, he said, will never, ever be the subject of any negotiation. Larijani has confirmed that the talks are strictly limited to the nuclear file. Missiles are off the table entirely. Iran's atomic energy chief has indicated they might dilute their 60% enriched uranium, but only in exchange for full sanctions relief. And even then, Larijani said reducing enrichment to 0 is unrealistic, since nuclear knowledge cannot be eliminated politically. So Trump is demanding things Iran refuses to give. Iran is offering terms Trump refuses to accept. These positions aren't close. They're not even in the same conversation. And here's what makes the gap unbridgeable. Trump isn't just negotiating about nuclear weapons. He's furious about the massacre. The killing of protesters is personal for him. He publicly promised to protect them, and they were slaughtered. The nuclear program gives him the legal and strategic framework to act, but the massacre gives him the political motivation. Iran, meanwhile, can't give Trump what he wants without the regime essentially surrendering. Khamenei has called the protesters participants in a coup and accused the United States of engineering the unrest. He told supporters, "The Americans want to devour Iran." Backing down to Trump after that rhetoric would be politically fatal. Now let me explain why Iran's warnings about a regional war aren't just bluster. Khamenei, speaking at a gathering in Tehran, marking the anniversary of the 1979 Islamic Revolution, delivered his most direct threat yet. The Americans must be aware that if they wage a war this time, it will be a regional war. Iranian military officials have gone further. They've stated that any military action by the United States, from any location at any level, will be considered the start of a war, and that the response will be immediate, comprehensive, and will target not just American forces, but Israel as well. Think about that chain reaction. If Trump strikes Iran, Iran retaliates against U.S. forces and potentially strikes Israel. Israel responds massively. Iran activates whatever proxy capabilities it still has after the June 2025 war. The Houthis in Yemen could target shipping in the Red Sea. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of all global oil flows, could be disrupted. Iran even scheduled a live-fire military exercise in the Strait of Hormuz on February 1st and 2nd. U.S. Central Command publicly warned Iran against threatening American warships or disrupting commercial traffic during the drill. Oil prices are already on edge. If the Strait of Hormuz closes, energy costs spike globally, supply chains collapse, and we're looking at an economic crisis on top of a military one. Every single one of America's allies in the region knows this. Saudi Arabia has said it won't allow its airspace to be used for strikes on Iran. Qatar is desperately mediating. Larijani met with Qatar's emir after the first round of talks. Turkey has offered to facilitate. Oman is running back channels. They're all begging for a diplomatic solution because they know they become targets the moment shooting starts. Here's what makes this situation uniquely dangerous. Iran can't back down without the regime losing its legitimacy. After the massacre, after Khamenei called it a coup and vowed to crush dissent, after declaring the United States wants to devour Iran, surrendering to Trump's demands would destroy the revolutionary credibility that holds the Islamic Republic together. But Iran also can't afford another war. Operation Midnight Hammer proved that the United States can penetrate Iranian airspace undetected. Iran's air defenses failed completely against the B-2 strike. Their nuclear facilities were severely damaged. The Pentagon assessed the strike set Iran's nuclear program back 1 to 2 years. If Trump strikes again, this time targeting not just nuclear sites, but military infrastructure, Revolutionary Guard facilities, missile production, Iran would face devastating losses. But here's the dilemma for Iran. If they absorb another strike without responding, they look weak. The Revolutionary Guard loses credibility. The Iranian people, who just watched the government massacre them in the streets, see a regime that can kill civilians but can't defend the country. That's existentially dangerous for the Islamic Republic. So Iran has to respond to any strike. But responding means escalation. And escalation against the United States is a war Iran cannot win. Let me lay out the 3 ways this could go. Scenario 1. Limited strike, contained response. Trump hits nuclear facilities again, maybe targets Revolutionary Guard bases and missile production sites. Iran absorbs the blow, fires missiles at U.S. bases in the region, maybe targets a ship in the Persian Gulf. Both sides claim victory and step back from the brink through intermediaries. This is the optimistic scenario, but it requires both sides to show restraint at the exact moment domestic political pressure demands escalation. Iran can't look weak. Trump can't look like he didn't finish the job. The odds of a clean exit are low. Scenario 2. Regime decapitation. Trump targets regime leadership. Khamenei, top Revolutionary Guard commanders, hoping to create chaos in Tehran and trigger the regime's collapse from internal pressure. This is what some in Trump's orbit reportedly want. Not a war. Regime change through precision strikes and popular uprising, but it's enormously risky. If the leadership is hit and the regime doesn't collapse, whoever survives launches everything Iran has at American forces and Israel. And if the regime does fall, there's no plan for what comes next. The country could spiral into factional violence, and Iran's weapons, including whatever nuclear material survived the June strikes, end up in uncertain hands. Scenario 3. Full-scale war massive bombardment of Iran's military infrastructure, air campaign lasting weeks, potential special operations on the ground. This is the nightmare scenario. Iran is a nation of 90 million people, with a real military, ballistic missiles, and the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz. A full war doesn't end in weeks. It costs trillions. And there's no guarantee of a clean outcome. So what should you be watching over the coming days and weeks? Watch Trump's language. If he suddenly shifts from threats to praising negotiations, it means Iran is making real concessions behind the scenes. If he keeps saying, time is running out and we'll find out, the diplomatic window is closing. Watch military movements. Trump has already said he'll send a second carrier group to the Persian Gulf if a deal isn't reached. Reports indicate Patriot missile launchers have been erected at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. If B-2 bombers redeploy to Diego Garcia or tanker aircraft start pre-positioning, that's your 24-hour warning. Watch oil prices. If they spike above $100 a barrel on no obvious news, traders know something the public doesn't. Markets always move first. Watch Iran's rhetoric. If state media goes quiet, if officials stop making public threats, they may be bracing for impact. If they keep talking tough, they think Trump is bluffing, or they've decided to absorb whatever comes. Watch Israel. Netanyahu traveled to Washington this week and presented Trump with principles for negotiating with Iran. Larocheni has explicitly warned the U.S. not to let Netanyahu shape the framework of the talks. If Israel acts independently, strikes Iranian nuclear sites on its own, it forces America's hand on a timeline Washington doesn't control. Watch the Muscat Channel. Oman is the critical intermediary. The first round of indirect talks happened there on February 6th. Larijani returned to Muscat days later to meet with the Omani foreign minister and reportedly exchanged letters. If a second round is scheduled quickly, diplomacy is alive. If the channel goes silent, prepare for the worst. Here's what this comes down to. Trump has shown he's willing to bomb Iran. He did it 8 months ago with Operation Midnight Hammer. He destroyed nuclear facilities that took decades to build. He has the military assets in position to do it again. And this time he has a politically powerful motivation. 30,000 dead protesters, whose blood is on the regime's hands. Iran has shown it will use extreme violence to maintain power domestically, but has limited options against American military force. Their air defenses failed in June. Their nuclear program was badly damaged. Another round of strikes could be devastating. Both sides are negotiating. Both sides are also preparing for war. The talks in Muscat may produce something. Iran's offer to dilute enriched uranium in exchange for sanctions, relief is a starting point. But the core issues, zero enrichment, missile limits, regime accountability for the massacre, remain unbridged. Trump's "we'll find out" wasn't casual. It was a calculated message to Tehran. I'm done waiting. You have until my deadline, a deadline he's deliberately kept secret to maximize psychological pressure, to come to terms. If you don't, we're going to test whether Khamenei's promises of regional war are real or just words. The Abraham Lincoln is in position. Negotiations are underway in Oman. Khamenei is warning of regional war. Trump is daring him to prove it. Someone has to blink, and neither side can afford to. The next few weeks will determine whether this ends at a negotiating table in Muscat, or with Tomahawk missiles in the air over the Persian Gulf. If you made it this far, you understand how critical this moment is. Trump's "we'll find out" isn't just another headline. It's the closest the US and Iran have been to a direct military confrontation since Operation Midnight Hammer. Drop a comment. Do you think this ends with a deal or with strikes? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because when this situation breaks, you'll want to know immediately. Thanks for watching.